We've really come a long way as humans in our development, in our scientific methods, our discovery of how to manipulate nature to our whims. But at the same time, we've lost the most crucial aspect of our existence, which was living in symbiosis with other creatures and understanding how to utilize nature without having to abuse and manipulate it to the extent that we use up our own resources. The population has doubled since I was born. That is something that most people are aware of, but really let that sink in for a minute. If any population of any creatures doubles in size in a period of less than 50 years, it generally lends itself to annihilation. And for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, if you will, depending on your view of history and how long you think humans have been aware, there have been, many scientists have said, well, humans have only really been, aware and creating and making art and instruments for 20,000 years, and then it was extended to 50,000 years. Now we've found tools and instruments from 200 to 250,000 years old. We don't know how long humans have been creating and inventing and manipulating the environment, but we do know one thing. Most of the discoveries surrounding medicine and herbalism, using certain plants and medicines, are something that were passed down, word of mouth, long before there was a written language. And sometimes when I hear people say, how the hell did our ancestors figure out that if you combine this herb and this herb, a great example would be ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a DMT containing mixture, which is usually made from two plants, Banisteropsis caapi, which is a vine, for example, and then Mimosa hostilis, root bark from a specific tree. That root bark contains a lot of DMT. That DMT is not orally active within the body. However, if you add an MAOI, or a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, then it allows your body to absorb it. That's what the Banisteropsis caapi vine is for. How did they know, out of the millions of different species of plants and animals in the jungle, to mix these two plants? Well, let's look at the thousands of years that we had to figure it out. Let's look at the concoction where people may have added, one specific ingredient to one of their standard meals, maybe, or a tea they make, and found, wow, that had crazy effects. These things can take so long. We don't understand the thousands of years of evolution of discovery of herbology because we're comparing it to our 200 years of technology, if you will. Let me just say that there's something to be revered about our ancestors who figured these things out. They didn't understand the science or the biology behind it. They just knew it worked. And we have kind of a hubris and arrogance in our modern day that science makes these people look like idiots. That's just not the case. Science is science. It's a great way to discover the universe and understand things by doing experiments and repeating those experiments. It's not the be-all, end-all, though, because there were many discoveries made before science that really haven't been able to be explained by science. And the great example would be, why does a certain plant or herb or substance have an effect on the humans? And in the past, we didn't understand it. It was through research of marijuana that we discovered that the body has an endocannabinoid system, just like we have endorphins. So, for those who don't know, endorphins, which I'm sure you've heard of, those, pain-killing molecules that kick in when we get hurt, endorphins are endogenous morphine. That's what it means, literally. Endogenous means it occurs within the body, and morphine is morphine. Endorphins are endogenous morphine, and there's also the endocannabinoid system, which is the body's natural cannabinoid system. And the main ingredient within that cannabinoid system is what they call, THC was studied for a long time, and then they found a molecule within the human body that resembled THC very closely. It was named properly anandamide. Anandamide, reflecting on the god of pleasure, if you will, or the bliss molecule. That's what it literally means in translation, the bliss molecule. And I found that kind of funny, but cannabis is very unique in its properties. It regulates many different parts of who we are and how we operate. But cannabis has been used for thousands of years. It can regulate the body temperature, many different aspects of our mood and mind. I'm not saying cannabis is totally safe. I've seen psychosis kick in from people taking high doses or not properly, utilizing it. But that's what it all comes down to with all plants and medicines is dose. There's an old saying, and I don't recall the exact saying right now. It's the dose is the cure or the poison. The poison is in the dose, or the poison or cure is in the dose, something like that. Something you always remember. If you take a small amount of a compound, a plant, for example, digitalis, which is found in foxglove. Foxglove is a beautiful flower that grows in these large, I'm not sure the proper term for it, but these large buds that come off the top of various colored flowers, white, purple, yellow, and they are beautiful, but they're highly toxic. If you eat them, you can suffer heart issues because of it. And the irony is that this very toxin is actually extracted from these flowers and from other sources. Digitalis is refined and standardized to be used in heart medication to help regulate the heart. So the very thing that can kill your heart can cure your heart. And the same thing with cannabis. It can actually help people with psychosis, with paranoia. But if they take a high dose or aren't properly analyzing how they're using it, then you're fucked and you feel like shit. And that's scary because we live in a time when there are no gurus on these topics. That's the main point here. I would like to think that I'm an expert on marijuana, for example. I've been smoking it most of my life. 33 years I've been smoking pot. I've learned so much about the different feelings between eating it, smoking it, hashish versus bud. And ultimately, it really comes down to personal preference and body chemistry, as well as your needs, what you're taking it for. Is it for appetite? Is it for anxiety? Lethargy? There's so many different aspects. Sativa or indica. And that's just one herb. Weed. Something that the only reason we talk about weed is because when you smoke weed with high THC, you get high and you feel it. But now we know that there's CBN, there's CBD. There are various other compounds within the plant that also benefit people that aren't psychoactive. And this is the truth for all plants. Our ancestors had done a lot of research on these things. They had done a lot of experiments and came to the conclusion that certain plants were better than others. Whoops. Oh, god damn, I'm fucking good. The thing and my phone fell and I went whoosh and caught it like a pro, dude. I'm good like that. So, anyway, peppermint, tea tree oil, even things like oregano oil. A lot of these terpenes, as they call them, can be bought cheaply online now. A lot of them are synthetic, but many are natural terpenes. Let's put it this way, they can grow huge amounts of peppermint in a field. They can take that peppermint, put it in a distillery, reduce it down, make essential oils out of it, and sell it to the American public from China, which I'm not going to get into the politics of who makes how much money, but let's just say it's cheaper than it should be. And you can buy a giant bottle of it for like $20. And essential oils were considered like the most divine and expensive things back in the day. It took a long time to distill it. Essential oils are another aspect of herbology. There's a lot of claims made about how if you just smell something, you can be cured of this or that. Look, I actually have essential oils in the shower area in my house. I've used lavender, lemongrass, but mostly eucalyptus, peppermint, and tea tree oil. Put a couple drops on the edge of the shower while you're taking a shower. Just pulls that steam up into your face, helps clear out the sinuses, but also it's an antibacterial. These natural oils have antibacterial and antiparasitic benefits. And that's why a lot of people back in the day would eat that actual herb to help kill off certain parasites and to, heal themselves. And they only learn this through experimentation. And we're losing this. We're losing it quickly. I watched a documentary probably 15 years ago talking about this exact thing, how the tribes within the Amazon there are more plants and animals and insects in the Amazon than anywhere on the planet. In fact, I think that in the Amazon alone, the species outweigh the rest of the planet. It's millions. It's a lot. And there are some plants out there that probably only grow in one place with, very specific needs. And when you find them, they can be extremely healing. I guess a great example would be cordyceps, which has been very popularized in the latest installment of a show called zombie installment of a show called The Last of Us on HBO Max. Phenomenal show. It was really good, well done, good drama, a good storyline, and followed somebody trying to naturally find a cure for this pandemic, which had killed off most people, almost all people. But it was a fungus that killed them off. Cordyceps can infect Cordyceps militaris, I believe, is the one that will infect the brains of ants. So it'll infect, a spore will enter the ant. And here's how it works. A lot of people have, talked a lot about cordyceps. This fascinates me. So the cordyceps, a spore, which is the equivalent of a seed from the fungus, will be floating through and attach itself to an ant. Once it attaches itself to this ant, the spore will detonate. Now, I mean this literally. They say the power is more than a bullet. It has to do this to penetrate the shell of the ant. So it detonates somehow with its internal mechanisms and then enters the bloodstream of the ant, releases its spores into, or DNA, RNA, however it works, into the ant. It travels right to the brain, and the ant says, "Oh, I'm under control now." And this ant will descend from its nest, or wherever it's feeding or harvesting. It will go down to the floor of the forest. Then it will cruise along for an unknown amount of time until it finds just the right plant to climb up onto. Once it climbs up onto the stalk of this plant, it will climb to a very specific height, which I believe is somewhere between 26 and 36 centimeters. I don't recall if it has to do with predators that can get it or whatnot, but it'll climb to a very specific altitude on the plant. Then it will climb out onto a leaf or a stalk and climb under that leaf to the bottom. Once it gets to the bottom of that leaf, it will grip on and tighten its grip really strong onto the main vein of the leaf and just die. Crazy shit, right? But of course, that's not the rest of it. It After the ant dies, those spores begin to devour the rest of the body, and they grow out and pop out through the head and the rest of the body, and then they grow little fungi with their own little spore pockets. And then, since they're on the bottom of the leaf, they're protected from, the weather, rain, whatnot. And then they burst. Those spores travel through the forest, and next thing you know, they're on another ant, and it starts the process all over again. And that's kind of a little off the beaten path here, but let's just say that cordyceps themselves are highly prized as medicinal food. Even the most toxic fungi and plants can be extremely good for humans. Up in Tibet, they harvest these off of silkworms that bury themselves in the ground. Or wait, no, up there I think it's a type of beetle that buries themselves in the ground in the winter, or maybe it's a cocoon of beetle, but a chrysalis, I don't know. But these fungi find these creatures, they find the eggs, they grow, and they eat up the larvae underground. Then they grow themselves out of the surface, and they pop out about yay tall, a few centimeters, right? And the natives will go up on these bare hillsides, and they'll look for the little telltale signs, and they'll pick them, and they use it for altitude sickness, for breathing issues, for lungs. And the irony is that they grow at extremely high altitudes. And so, of course, they're going to use it. It's funny how nature puts certain plants in certain places that seem to help with that very thing. And but anyway, they've been using it for thousands of years. It became popular, so naturally they started growing it in laboratories, and then growing it in big warehouses. And you can generally buy Cordyceps sinensis for a reasonable price. I have a blend that I take of mushrooms with reishi, Cordyceps, lion's mane, and chaga, and it's like this immune booster blend. Felt like I was getting sick a while back, just take those, and it kind of kicks its ass. I used to have them for sale on my website. I really should start doing that again, because they're actually really useful, and with all the shit on the market these days, and that's the thing with herbs. You don't know what really works for what. Everybody's making bold claims. Nothing's a cure-all. Same thing with kratom. As a vendor for a long time, I still sell it just to friends and family, but I'm always really cautious not to get people who don't take it into it, because it can be addictive for many people, and it can also be, just be kind of a compulsion to take it, to get inspired or to get motivated. I mean, I've been taking it for 15 years almost, but I keep a minimal dose, don't overdo it. Sometimes I overdo it. I overdo anything, but anyway. Are you sneezing, girl? You alright? My dog's been in the pond forever. She's been out there hunting the goldfish, so they look like they're alright. I can see them. Anyway, back to the point here. You really got to look at you got to get out in nature, and you've got to research and understand the plants around you. It seems like the pharmaceutical industry has kind of replaced the need for any type of natural medicine for a lot of people. There is a belief that mankind has created a better system. And in some instances, this is true. But in many, it's not. In fact, in many, it's people using those very natural substances to create a synthetic version and selling it back to you. Like I said, digitalis, foxglove, selling it back to you as heart medication for who knows how much money. It's a matter of just refining a natural product and understanding it. That science should be universal. It should be free to everyone. But unfortunately, we have patent law, corporate lobbying, and intellectual property. And a lot of people support those things. I get it. But it holds us back. As a species, intellectual property rights and copyright are just the dumbest things ever. Nothing really has to be protected and prestigious. We just have to move forward and find things that matter. So if somebody finds a chemical two elements or two molecules that you can combine to make a new molecule that extremely benefits humanity, and it's an easy research, then sell it for a cheap price if you can manufacture it cheap. But it really comes down to affecting all of us. Like these, point being, these discoveries have been thousands of years in the making. Many of these plants and substances and concoctions have been used forever. Look at what's happening to the mushroom industry. In fact, I heard somebody's trying to patent a psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in psychedelic mushrooms, a psilocybin and lion's mane mushroom extract combination. It's like I've been doing that for years. Every time I take mushrooms, I take some of my lion's mane too. It's considered to be neuroprotective and build up your brain. People are pretending like they've just discovered plants and mushrooms that have been around forever. And I think that we should really stand up and say these things should be free and available. If somebody's going to sell you psychedelic mushrooms and say you can't grow them yourself, it's just as dumb as what we've got here in Washington State, where you can buy pot down at the corner store, but you can't grow it yourself because our law was poorly written. But I think we don't give plants enough credit, and we really need to rethink the way that we do things and think for ourselves and do our own research, and especially be able to document these historical truths, these historical concoctions people have found to be healing. A lot of, people don't realize this. There's something called, I think it's called medicinal piracy or pharmaceutical piracy. There are a lot of pharmaceutical industries do this. They'll send a bunch of people down to, Ghana or Brazil, and they'll go out to the actual middle of nowhere to the tribes, and they'll find things that they take and concoctions. They'll try to manipulate these jungle plants and in order to make more money. It's never about solving, the illness. It's always about, moderating that profit margin. And I think if it takes a lot of time to create something and discover something, that's one thing. But we're being completely hoodwinked a lot of the time. And whenever there is a natural cure, a lot of people don't realize this. If there's a natural alternative to a medicine that you're being sold, you won't be told about it because it can't be it can't be profitized, it can't be capitalized on, because by law you cannot patent a naturally occurring plant or substance. There are limits. They try to get around that by combining certain things and making their own synthetic versions, but generally a natural plant or fungi cannot be patented. Therefore, it's up to you to discover whether they help you or not. And at any rate, talk to you next time. I'm going to go get something to eat. Peace.